Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience, where they felt stuck, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others and finding possibility for yourself. Let's get into this week's conversation. We are back for another exciting episode of Off the Comma. I'm very excited to be here again this week and get to learn about another really powerful and amazing person as we do every week on every episode. This week will be no exception. This week, I have the privilege of being able to interview someone who I actually do know. Usually, I'm on here talking about how I get to meet somebody for the first time and so forth. And this week, I get to talk to and hear a powerful story from somebody who I do know and that I have worked with a bit. And if that comes up in his story, that's great. If not, let's get into his story. I'm going to stop rambling, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Vince. Vince, introduce yourself to everybody, and let's do what we always do before you jump into the what I do for work and that sort of thing. Start by telling us, how would you like to be known as a person, as a human?
Hi, Paul. It's absolute pleasure to be with you. So thank you for inviting me on to the podcast. When you asked that question about how do I want to be known, I instantly thought it would be different things at different stages in my life. So at this
Mm,
point, where I've got to now and where I'm most settled, I would say um, it's purposeful, um, determined in that, very reflective. I think that's how I'd like to be known and remembered.
okay. Purposeful, determined, reflective. Like already, I'm hearing kind of traits and characteristics that are kind of deep. They're very thoughtful, um,
Uh,
even a little bit serious, if I say.
Yeah, I think and this will come up, I guess, through my story as we talk about it a bit more. I think I spent a lot of my life not being those things, and
Mm,
um, I really value them. And I think I was just taken up for so much of my life on the pace of just trying to achieve and trying to be what I thought the concept of success was like.
mm.
There's been a couple of points that have led me to just waking up one day going, no, actually, but is that the real me? And so I've been able to lean into just being far more authentic in the last few years, and I feel those things reflect me now. I love working and developing with people, which will come out in what I do, but I equally leave me at home for 10 hours listening to Pink Floyd on my own in my lounge, and I'm just as happy. Because that music
Hmm.
takes you to places where you just have to listen and think, what did they really mean when they were writing all this? So yeah, I'm much more thoughtful than I ever used to be.
It's really cool, and I know a lot of us. I mean, life and humanity and humans are so varied and diverse. But I know in my own experience and people that I talk to, it's like you get to a certain stage in your life, or maybe a certain series of events happens, or maybe it's a certain age in your life. And like for me, I remember it's like just one day, it's like I got to start paying attention more, and I had no idea how rich what bringing that to life actually meant. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you describe.
Hmm.
What else, Vince? Because we're going to get into your story where I know a lot of this is going to shape itself out. Just by way of brief introduction, what else would you like for people to know about you before we get into your story today?
Sure, I guess probably a couple of the main things now is I've been running my own leadership development consultancy. I'm into my fourth year of doing that now after spending years in industry, both in um, technology businesses and leading kind of change in
Mm,
big and small corporates, but then also for nearly 10 years working at and for a leadership training business on their board, and the last couple of years as managing director there. That shaped everything for me to go, well, this now seems to be the perfect place for me. Let's take all of that experience that I've gained, all of the mistakes I made. I want to help people either make quicker or get past
mm,
faster. So that's one thing. And the other part of it now for me, which is becoming a more prominent part of my life, is the fact that I'm now a sobriety coach, like your good self, how we met.
mm.
And being able to help people navigate the journey that I found extremely difficult and at a point when there wasn't too much support around for it. Um, it sounds a bit corny, but I've kind of reached a point in life where I just really enjoy giving back to people and helping people, almost like giving that leg up for them for the next stage of helping them achieve the best of what they can be. And I just love doing that. Those are the days I get the biggest thrills from when you get those light bulb moments with people.
I love it when we reach that stage. And, I think like, honestly, if we look back over the evolution of human history, it's like, I think it's kind of important that we get to that stage too, right? Because
Mm,
it's not that every generation necessarily, a lot of this is cultural too, right? And some cultures, like the younger parts of the generation, are encouraged to, or even kind of expected to seek out advice and wisdom from their elders. Western
yeah.
society, that's not quite as common, but it kind of does happen organically and naturally. So it's like, why wouldn't you want to share what you've learned from this kind of vast set of experiences that you've enjoyed in life, right? And or
Mm.
not even always enjoyed.
Most of them probably not, if I'm honest, but yeah.
Right? What was it I said? And one time, and it wasn't necessarily original. It was like my own words, but I know it was inspired by other things I'd learned and heard from others. But it's like the pain becomes the product, like the thing that we endure, suffer through, enjoy, whatever, right? In life, kind of often, particularly with people that I'm talking to on this podcast,
Yeah.
the thing that they experienced or endured or even suffered through then kind of becomes the thing that's the center of where they go next. Either it becomes the book or it becomes the new work or the new job or becomes, you know, the focus. So,
And you've triggered something there in me that I'd not thought of before, which is I spent nearly all of my professional career chasing really big goals, big implementations, big
mhm.
successes. So the journey to achieve them was always months, but quite often years. But the period of actually enjoying the success, probably a day.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the things that's making me reflect a bit more about who I am now is how do you start to get a bit more fulfillment and enjoyment out of each day and living with some success far more regularly?
hmm.
Because those successes they were amazing because they were huge, big achievements, but it felt like my whole life was geared around achieving those big things, and I was just ignoring so many of the smaller things that actually can provide the same kind of chemical hit and just make you feel a bit better about yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And, I'll interject that certainly in Western society, right? Like we're not even programmed or allowed to kind of train ourselves to that because the success was just expected and that's what
Mm,
you were paid for. And you're supposed to move on to the next thing to make somebody else a whole lot of money, like you and I were talking about before we started recording. And
yeah,
so, to anybody who's like, why don't we and why can't we celebrate the success more and everything? It's like, you absolutely can. You just may have to claim it for yourself. You may not be able to expect the people in your environment to do it because it's what you want. You may have to
yeah,
claim it, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Vince, let's give you a chance to get into your story. One more question before we get to the first of the five questions. As you think ahead to the next 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes or so of telling and sharing your story with us today, what intention would you have for yourself in this moment?
That's a good question. My intent is to be honest and share the vulnerability of parts of my journey. There are so many things like when run your own business. Every single day you're bombarded with marketing people that have found the perfect way for you to get all the best customers. Like you hear it all the time. And I guess
Hmm.
what I don't want to do in this is that I found this great place in life now where, don't get me wrong, there are still challenges every day. Some things are still difficult, but I sit far more comfortably with it. And I kind of own my space a lot more. Um, and can ride the waves of it a lot easier. And what I don't want to do is create some impression for people that that's really easy. Follow this method and you'll achieve this in your 20s, not in your 50s, like me. So I
Mm,
guess I really want to. Um, I'm getting more comfortable at sharing my vulnerability, and I guess that'll be my measure at the end of this. Did I
mm.
really tell my honest story?
I see your intention, and my intention is to support that because what you're saying, I feel like really aligns with what we're trying to accomplish here on this podcast. My intention is to create the space for you to be able to share that story and do exactly what you just said, and that there will be people out there who are listening to your story and they'll see a little bit of themselves in you and the story that you shared. and that
Mm,
will help them feel a little bit more connected, maybe a little bit less alone, and in the best of cases, even inspired or empowered to go out and do something that they've been wanting to do. And the way we do it here is that if we don't give advice and we don't tell people what it's supposed to be, it's always an invitation for them to pull what matters and what's important and what resonates to them personally out. And that's what I believe I'm hearing you say is like you want to be able to
yeah,
share the story and let people make their own decision.
absolutely that. Yeah.
And in that reflection, by the way, I'll do that throughout our conversation. Anytime I misreflect something or whatever, just correct me, tell me where I'm off base or what have you. So,
Okay.
okay. Well, let's get into it. Let's jump into the first question. Vince, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
Two places. And again, deep reflection. What seems such a simple question, actually, when you look back
Mm,
at your life. If I look at I've been married more than once. Okay, I've got children by more than one wife. I've had multiple jobs. I've rarely kept a job, certainly up to my mid 40s for more than 3 or 4 years. So there were many, many points where I was making decisions and changes, or other people were making decisions that were impacting what I then needed to do. Um, but fundamentally, when I thought about were they commas, actually, they weren't. I think it was still the same Vince, just going about his life the same way.
mm,
And therefore, I was causing consequence around me by the way I was doing that. But the two specific moments, unsurprisingly by our connection, were directly related to alcohol consumption. The first one was the first time that I actually acknowledged that I needed to stop drinking. And it was life preservation.
mm,
I wasn't in the lowest of low places that so many of us can read so many stories about. To the outside world, I didn't have a problem. In fact, this was part of my comma moment because I was trying to convince people that I needed some support, even my closest people and friends around me. And they didn't see it. It was almost like, oh, Vince is just having a wobble this week. Just pull yourself together. You'll be all right next week kind of thing. But
mm,
I knew it was almost a more existential crisis I was having. It was perfect storm that first in time. Remarried, happily remarried, but we'd crashed two families together. By the way, Paul, I don't know if you ever have heard of or if you ever find one, but if there's a perfect book on there on how to be a step parent, please let me know where it is, although I don't now need it. But there is no rule book for being a step parent. I mean, God knows it's hard enough just to be a parent, right? But
mm,
when you throw the dynamics into this that the stepchildren have the right to just reject you at any point if they want to, because they don't while they're going through their maturity. And then when you throw four of those young adults into that situation, um, that was a challenge. In this particular situation as well, um, recognizing that there are many sides to every story, let's just say that at least neither my new wife or I had smooth, harmonious relationships with our previous partners. So
mm,
that caused some disruption at various stages from either side at different points and of varying levels. And at this point, I was a director in a business where cash was an issue. And at some points in some board meetings, even the very future existence of the business was an issue. So,
mm,
and those weren't the type of things, well, as a director, you don't go home and talk about those, and you certainly don't talk about them to your friends anyway, but not that I could anyway, because none of my friends kind of had similar job or understood that responsibility. So I found myself in this situation where all of those things reached a boiling point all at once. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term about how many buckets we can fill up with kind of things that we're managing, right?
mm,
Oh man, mine were all overflowing. And my only coping mechanism that I'd ever learned in life was to go and seek some temporary numbness from that by having a drink.
mm,
And for most of my life, that actually was an enjoyable thing that I ran towards because I really enjoyed those 3 or 4 hours with the people I was in the community with and sharing that with. But this was the first time when I realized that actually it didn't matter who was in the bar I was in. Yeah, I was going to drink the volume I was drinking. And
mm,
because I just needed to numb everything and stop feeling what I was feeling. And that particular day ended badly. Um, that's one level of vulnerability I'm actually not prepared to go into today, but
Mm,
nobody was hurt in the making of this story, okay? Uh, and nobody got arrested either.
okay.
But it was definitely was a position that I woke up the next morning and thought, I just do not want to be that man I was yesterday. And the one thing I've always been preaching of, I guess, to people around me all through my work career, especially as I got more into the coaching style of working, is you may have an aspiration of what you want to be, but you are literally the person as you behaved yesterday, because that is you. So I kind of woke
Mm-hmm.
up with this really um, quite shocking and difficult emotion to live with, that I just wasn't the person I wanted to be before I even started to analyze how I started to empty these buckets and get them more under control. And I literally went from drinking how many? I don't know. I was at least a 6 day a week drinker,
Mm-hmm.
and at least three of those days would be reasonably heavy. Um, I went from that of 25, 30 years to literally zero overnight. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
touch a drink then for 15 months. Now, I went through lots of different emotions, as we know we do when we give up that volume of drinking, and everything resets, and I got into a
Mm-hmm.
much more stable place. And thankfully, I managed to pull myself out of that situation just through the journey of sobriety and having a clearer head and being able to work through things.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go to my second comma, because the inevitable happened. I'd stopped drinking because I needed to, not because I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So we're on holiday 15 months later. We're sitting in a lovely beachfront restaurant. It's nice, balmy, warm evening. The tide is just lapping in on this lovely golden beach. It just was the romanticism of it got me. My wife was having a glass of wine. I said, "Oh, shall I have a glass of red?" She's like, "Of course you can have a glass of red. Like, I've never told you you can't drink." So I had the one glass of red. Well, in fact, I had two, and I could barely walk. I was amazed at, like, how did I ever be able to knock back three bottles of this stuff when I can't even do two glasses now?
Mm-hmm.
But that then started a process of I mean, we talk about grey area drinking now. We talk about moderation. It started a process of me drinking probably every 5 to 10 days. So I'd totally broken the back of my relationship with alcohol. I didn't drop back into drinking daily. But what I found was when I used to drink daily, I never worried about alcohol, apart from
Mm-hmm.
a hangover. But now into the moderate drinking, which I did for, I've never actually counted the time, Paul. I think it was probably about 6 years, because I never reached that point of needing to stop. It wasn't becoming an obstacle in my ability to do everything I wanted to do in my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And the drinking really was moderate. Like, I might only drink 10 pints of beer a month, or wine. It was that kind of volume I was at. And
Mm-hmm.
actually I reached a point where we went on a very special holiday to over to your shores. We went to New York for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't drunk for a month before we went. I didn't drink on the plane. My wife had this big sash on saying 50th, so you can imagine how the air crew treated her. Like, and everything was like, "This is Mr. Hannant's, but Mrs. Hannant can have this one as well." So it was she could walk off the plane, but she had a great time on there. And actually, it was when we were in the car going into Manhattan, going to the hotel, that I thought, "Yeah, actually, I'm going to drink." And I I kept up with all of the consumption then through the 5 days. But on the third day of the holiday, um, I was the last one standing, and I wasn't content, so I went back out to another bar on my own.
Mm.
It's probably about 1 in the morning, and and this bar was like four or five people deep, so I had a lot of time just to stand there waiting to be served. And I just, what am I doing here? Like,
Mm.
what am I doing here? What possible enjoyment am I going to get from this moment when all the people I want to share my life with have now gone to bed? I know they're where this would have ended 20 years ago, but actually at that point, I just turned around and walked back out the bar, went back to the hotel room. And by the way, there's no row. My wife knew I'd gone back out, and she was okay with it. She was like, just make sure that you come back in one piece, don't get in any
Mm-hmm.
trouble. So we didn't have any. any tension or issues in the relationship like that, I had full permission to go and do this if it was what I really wanted to do. But I made the decision walking back to the hotel. I'm done because this
Mm.
has now taught me for the first time in like the 6 years that this is the first time I've kind of tapped on the door of the type of drinking I used to do that eventually wasn't serving my life. And I don't think I've ever come across anyone who's made the decision in the way that I did that day because I went back to the room and I said to my I'll still drink for the last 2 days. My last drink will be on the plane on Friday when we head back to the UK.
Hmm.
And I won't touch it. Well, my words to her were, I don't intend to drink again when I go back.
Mm.
So I was very careful with the language. I didn't say forever. Um, but
Yeah, your intention, it sounds like your intention was to leave yourself an out in case you needed it,
well,
but it wasn't a declaration.
do you know what? I didn't feel at that moment as if I was ever going to take an out.
Hmm.
But what I felt like was if I proclaimed that, I would start to have a lot of difficult conversations as to why I would believed it would be forever. So the reason,
Mm.
actually, in my mind, I really did believe this really could be my last ever drink because I have
Hmm.
no intention of now picking it up again. But but I already had enough experience from the years that I've been trying, had been sober and trying to be sober. That I thought I just don't want to draw attention to how big this decision is. Let people just see it as it unfolds. And
Hmm.
and so yeah, that was my second common moment, and I haven't touched a drop since then, and still feel the same way, by the way, that um I don't see when I would ever get the desire to have alcohol again.
Hmm.
Because the longer I go sober, the more I realize why I really don't want another drink.
Yeah. Well, let me reflect a couple of things. Buy you some breathing time so you can kind of listen a little bit. So, and correct me where I misreflect anything, but it seems like, well, first of all, I mean, you experience something that so many people do experience, right? So once again, we have a brave soul sharing their story about their experience with their relationship with alcohol. And I think about how many people out there who might be thinking or might be on the fence, and even just you sharing what it's like it is such a huge level of permission for other people to even acknowledge it for themselves. Boom. I mean, that in and of itself, I think is important to acknowledge. But reflecting, I mean, definitely I hear you talking about the two commas, and yet those two commas are connected, right? It's like those two
Mm.
commas are really in the same sentence or the same paragraph because one comma really beget the other one in a way, begat. And what kept coming up for me was you tell me if this is not correct. Up to the moment where you described all the buckets were overflowing, and then you had a pivotal event. It sounds like you weren't really thinking about it as much, right? But ever since then, regardless of what dynamic you chose or what nature of the relationship between those two commas, it seemed like you were always much more conscious and thinking about it from then on.
Yeah, that's definitely right. Because the first time round, it was the realization that alcohol was an obstacle to me trying to get a grip of everything around me.
Mm.
So I had to stop drinking it to start to get a grip. And it was about 3 months before I kind of really started to appreciate the benefit of not drinking.
Hmm.
But once I'd gone that long and I was experiencing these benefits, that was enough for me to keep going. But actually, what was always in my mind was that I had stopped because I had to.
Mm.
And I think what changed then with that second comment was when I'd started the casual drinking again. And like literally I could go 20, 30 days without a drink and then I'd drink for a couple of days and I might go another 20 days and not drink. But every single day in that whole cycle, I was thinking about alcohol because I was
Mm.
either wondering whether I should have a drink on the Friday or not. Why don't I just put it off till Saturday? Because I don't really need it. And I know I feel rough Saturday morning and I want to go to the gym or something. So there'd be all this dialogue going on through the week, just run on the run up to the weekend. And then I might drink on the Saturday and I might have one too many. And then Sunday I'd be snapping at my own shadow. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like, oh
Mm.
man, why am I like the poor dog hasn't done anything, and I just shouted at her to get out of the room. It's like you're under my feet, get out. Like, and she's like, but normally you like me under your feet. What's the problem? So but I'm really living those emotions rather than before thinking that's just who I was and how I was wired. So then I would beat myself up for 2 or 3 days in my head about why did I do that? Why did I just waste a day being someone I don't really want to be? So
Mm,
actually, the dialogue in my head was constant every day. It might be a slightly different topic, but it was always related to whether there's a drink coming or whether it's a drink that I've had that's just going behind me. So the only difference between the two commas was the first one I felt like I have to do this, and the second one became I want to do this.
hmm. And what strikes me is like the second comma was almost like this is where the story has to continue. This is where the story has to grow for you in your story, right?
I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, well, and I want to acknowledge that too because, you know, we could sit here and talk about other people who drink and so forth. This is another thing I wanted to acknowledge for you is I think a lot of times when people start to explore their relationship with alcohol, they get caught up in the, what are the rules? What are the standards? What are the norms? What is everybody else doing? How much is too much and so forth? And yet when you said, well, I was drinking before the first comma, right? I was
Mm.
drinking about this much a day or what have you. I know that so many people are be like, well, you know, how you didn't say specifically how much. And I know people, you said I was drinking too much or what have you. And I know there's a lot of people that's like, well, how much is too much? Was he drinking 4 glasses? He drinking 6 glasses? Was he drinking 2 bottles? Right. And I think the thing that helps when people do start to consider, ending their relationship with alcohol is to stop doing the comparison thing because
Yeah.
it almost kind of doesn't matter, you know, maybe after a certain point it does when it really starts to become excessive. But it's like one person's too much is another person's not enough, right? So what does matter is how much is too much for you, how much is too much for your comfort level, how much is too much for the goals and the objectives and the outcomes that you're
Yeah.
setting for yourself, right? So that was the acknowledgement I wanted to make is what I believe I'm seeing is that even in all of this kind of pre comma one conversation, you were really starting to assess what was enough for you. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
And
And
you know,
and
sorry, Paul, can I just say to support
please
that?
do.
I had a conversation with somebody 2 or 3 months ago who drinks a fair bit and kind of asking for a friend. So how much was too much for you, Vince, when you decided you needed to stop? I had that exact direct question. And I said,
Hmm.
probably about 10. And he interrupted and he went, 10 pints a night. I went, no, a month. We had such a different measure and,
Totally.
I could have done 10 pints a night in the days when I
Hmm.
was drinking. But you're right. It's about, my wife still drinks, but she's drunk 5 times last year,
Hmm. Hmm.
maybe 3 or 4 gins on the heaviest of the nights.
Yeah.
Um,
Which was the other thing that I wanted to acknowledge is, you know, after comma one, but before comma two, you said I quit drinking because I needed to, and then you were persistently conscious and thinking
mm,
about the drinking, right? But after comma two, I don't know that you told us this, so let me reflect it and then you tell me if it's true. But after comma two, it seems like once you quit because you wanted to, then the obsession with it ended. At least that was my story. I didn't
yeah,
quit at all until I was 100% ready to quit and quit for good. And I think that's a big part of why I don't. And again, everybody's experience is different. So I'm not about to sit out here and say, well, you too could or you too should. But
yeah,
I didn't quit until I was actually completely done. And then I don't have cravings. I don't really think about it for the most part, unless I'm talking to other people about it, right?
mm,
Um, Sometimes, like if I walk past a place and see people sitting outside having mimosas, and I'm like, wow, was that a craving? No, it wasn't a craving because I don't actually want to sit down and drink those mimosas. It's fond memories, is what it is. But I think
absolutely,
there's a
yeah,
difference between the memory and the recollection versus the craving, which is like I could literally break down and have one of those. Like, so and I say all that not to distract from your story, but to say that's what I was taking from life after that second comma is that once you quit because you wanted to, then the rest seems to have kind of like subsided.
and you've hit the nail on the head because I think part of my thought process when I decided, even though I was still going to drink for another 2 days, part of my thought process was the only way to shut up this internal voice is to give it nothing to talk about.
Wow, that's deep right there.
And so the only way I can do that is just, right, well, alcohol's not an option on the table. End of.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And I found it surprisingly easy when I'd come to that peace in my own mind. Like first time round, I've never thought about this either. First time round, I was buying non-alcohol wines.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had something to hold in the evening, and it um it fulfilled the need. It fulfilled the habits that I'd created in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I keep Ribena in business these days. I mean, I don't know if you've got that drink in the States, but it's like, blackcurrant. I mean, it's all I drink so much of it at home. Um,
Wait, say what this was again, just for our
it's called
listeners.
Ribena. It's a blackcurrant cordial, basically.
Oh,
Um,
okay. No, I don't
and
think we're as familiar with it
yeah,
over here in the States.
and that's what it's quite a thick cordial, so it's not a sort of normal dilute, like squash type drink. It's got a thicker flavor than that. But that's my go-to drink at home all of the time. And
Mm.
I only now turn to non-alcoholic versions of alcohol drinks when I'm out with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I'm really conscious I'm doing that now. And I definitely only drink ones that I like. And I do it for inclusion. And and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean that on a really big and deep level. It's just actually I just feel a bit more part of the crowd if I'm holding a pint of Guinness Zero than what I would if I was holding a Coke or a black currant. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I like it, and it's not doing me anywhere near the harm that the other drinks have. So,
Right.
literally, those are the only times I drink it now.
So fascinating because as you were talking, I'm like, oh man, we could go off on an entirely different direction here. I'll introduce it in case it comes up later. But there's something interesting about that because I too will do it. Like if I'm by myself hanging out at the house or whatever, I'm drinking iced tea or whatever, decaf teas and so forth. I don't really buy non-alcohol wine or non-alcohol beer to have around the house. Sometimes a Corona Zero is kind of tasty on a hot day or whatever, but I don't have to have it. If I go
Mm.
out and I'm hanging out with friends, or especially in my travels, I'm staying with friends and they're still having a glass or two or three or 10 or 20 or whatever every night, like I used to. That's what I love to have the non-alcohol wine for. It's not because I'm feeling the craving because they're over there drinking, but it's almost like not only does it give me, I can sit here and drink wine with them too, and I don't have to worry about my old habits and
Yeah,
behaviors, but in a way, it almost makes them a little bit more comfortable too. For certain friends, I care about that. Otherwise, I don't care. But for certain friends, it's like, well, then you know what? We're all sitting here doing the same thing, enjoying ourselves, and we each can have our own experience with it.
I can relate
But
to that
but
as well.
I don't it's interesting. I don't do that with smokers. I don't smoke something artificial so I can stand around in a crowd of smokers. So, but I was never a smoker. So there you go. I guess that's it. Let's bring it back to you though, because you and I could talk about so many things here and I want to give you an opportunity to expand on your story. I think you've already answered this question. So what else would you add? The second question is, as you look back on this comma that you've been describing, what did it create for you?
Do you know, the first word that came to mind then, and it's not accurate, but it starts us on the journey, is tranquility. Because actually, that's what I wanted to say, and I thought, no, it's not really been tranquil since. But
Mm.
um, I didn't realize how much anxiety I carried. So I never would have considered myself an anxious person, and probably a
Mhm.
lot of people that knew me and worked with me wouldn't have regarded me as that either. But when you've just lived a certain way all of your kind of adult life, you have no perception of what living a different way feels like. And when the alcohol, I said about the 3 months, I said the first time around with drinking, and that was quite pivotal for me because it was only after about 3 months that I actually felt my body settle down. And ever since I stopped drinking, the only times now that I get anxious are when it's really deserved, like when my body is kicking in with a fight or flight option because of what's going on
Mhm.
around me. So I think there was, and the doors that opens up, okay, it means you're a lot more present emotionally in situations than you ever were before. And I think when I was a drinker, I used to associate that I would only lose control of my emotion when I was under the influence of alcohol.
Mhm.
What I've learned since is actually no, I'd lost the ability to control my emotions at any point I was awake, regardless of how long ago I last had a drink.
Mhm.
So I talked about the regularity of my drinking. I might have gone occasionally a couple of days without drinking, and I'd think, oh wow, I'm clean now. I'm cleansed. I haven't had a drink for. I mean, how funny is that, right? Um,
Mhm.
The cleansing takes a lot longer than that. But it was the impact of realizing, how the chemicals work on your brain, and actually your body needs a lot of time just to get used to the fact that stuff's not coming in anymore, and it has to
Hmm.
work out how it starts to regulate how you get the emotions and the dopamine hits for yourself and that. And that was the biggest thing for me, was just feeling like I was really sat in my life more, far more present
Mm.
in my life and what was going on, and a lot more aware of how I felt every day, and also a lot more aware of the emotions of the people around me. I found I was giving, and this is weird as well, because I spend most of my coaching life telling people to put themselves in the shoes of the people that they're trying to interact with, right?
Hmm.
And I just realized I, 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 I used to do that. I used to feel I was doing that, but somewhere along the line on that journey of leaning into how other people felt, there would always be a point of something in my head would go, yeah, but you're ignoring how I feel.
Mm.
And what I've realized now in my sobriety is, um, I can sit a whole day not caring that I don't think somebody else understands how I feel,
Mm.
which I couldn't do before. And and the feelings are still inside me that eventually I want to be heard. But actually, I'm far more comfortable sitting with much longer space to allow the other person to feel like they've really genuinely got a seat at the table with me for whatever situation it might be. It might be with my wife, it might be with one of my kids, it might be one of my work colleagues, or a customer or anything. Any situation, I'm far more comfortable at sitting wanting to be curious now. And
Mm.
I still want to be heard, don't get me wrong, Paul, but I'm prepared to really now pick the moments when it just really matters and adds some value.
It's fascinating to me, and you kind of highlight this. I've heard it from so many other people, and even just listening to you right now, I'm like, yeah, that this was true for me. But like you talked about, the first word you used to answer the question was tranquility, and then you said, but not immediately, not right away, as you said. But it's interesting how often for many of us who chose to drink, it was a general level of anxiousness or anxiety that kind of took us to the bottle because that calmed us down, right?
Yeah,
And then over time, as it becomes more of a habit and there's a more consistent infusion, then in and of itself, it creates more anxiousness, anxiety, and agitation. But we start to lose the awareness of it, right? So what you described was kind of like this consciously, I didn't believe that it was affecting me, but neurologically and physiologically and chemically, it was affecting me. And that now speaking for myself, it's not the like it showed up in these crazy random places. It's just like I'm on the medication, so it can influence my behavior at any given point in time, even in the most subtle and
yeah,
not even visible ways. Just, the getting home after a long day of work and realizing just how wound up I was. There was a difference that I could note from
mm,
when I used to drink on a regular basis to, in the times after I no longer drank, and just the complete different internal experience of 6 to 10 o'clock at night while drinking versus 6 to 10 o'clock at night when not
yeah,
drinking. And I don't mean when not drinking on that Tuesday, when not drinking anymore, ever.
absolutely. I understand. Yeah,
Mm.
and relate to that completely.
Let's use that as a jumping point then for question three, Vince. So, question three is, what have you learned about yourself as a result of sitting on these two commas?
Um, some uncomfortable things, and I'm going to think about some aspects of like my personality trait, how easily I can get wound up about situations.
Hmm.
Um, wow, I'm suddenly going deeper than even I thought I would. I look back at my parents and their behaviors through my childhood, and that's helped me understand how much I'm pre-wired.
Mm.
Um, so actually that's helped in those situations, because there are some of the traits of my personality under pressure that I can see I've inherited. So I'm wired that way, which allows me to really work on now how I control that, so that I, like I said near the beginning to you, like that, like I become the person I just actually want to be.
Hmm.
Um,
Can I jump in for a moment?
yeah, please do.
I don't want to pass up an opportunity here because you, based on the nature of the work that you do as a coach, and your intention, you said, was to be vulnerable. Your intention, you said, indirectly was to potentially inspire people. You just
Yeah.
said, wow, I'm going deeper than I wanted to or intended to. Can I just extend the invitation? You can tell me to fuck off if you want. Extend the invitation, like, because I believe those are the things that really will resonate with people and potentially prompt somebody. Like, how much
Okay.
deeper could you go here? Like, what is uncomfortable about revealing this? You said uncomfortable things. Again, push me right the hell back out again if you're like, nope, not going there. But I wanted to extend the
Yeah.
invitation.
No, you're good at this, Paul.
Mm,
I think it's recognizing that, we've got some character traits and like flaws with a small f, not a capital F,
hmm.
that just exist, right? None of us are perfect human beings. There are many people we aspire to what we'd like to be like, but we only ever see the public persona they want to show us. I'm sure even they will have moments behind closed doors where they're not the exact, the same kind of person. And I think there was something on my journey about as the sobriety effects and impacts really kicked in of a realization that somewhere along that path, and I've never thought about it, it never really happened. It wasn't an awakening one day or anything, but I'll actually never be that perfect human being that I really want to be
Mm,
instinctively.
hmm.
But what I can control is how I present myself. Um, One of the dangers with this, and I think about some of the coaching I do now, is to make sure you don't carry too much internally because
Hmm.
I'd be back to having that internal dialogue again, which would be bad for me. So I recognize now if I'm tired, like all bets are off. Like, just don't expect me to be the exact same calm person because when I'm tired and, and we all do to a degree,
Hmm.
but I know if my tiredness has reached a certain point, like just withdraw from the situation. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
go to bed because that's what your body's telling you need to do. Go and get some sleep. So I think there's and very occasionally, and to be honest, it only ever comes out at home because
Hmm.
that's our safe space, isn't it? That's where we're
Yeah.
allowed to be ourselves. And the great thing is now that my wife has seen so much of the good side of me and the kind of the real way I handle things that when this cranky Vince turns up, she won't quite laugh at it because that would be poking the bear, but not far off.
Hmm.
There's dynamics in the relationship where we just call it out for what it is. And
Hmm.
and we could both do that both ways because, you know, same thing happens to her occasionally as well. But I think that even sitting with the fact that I could still be that person that reacts in a way that I wouldn't choose to react or be known to react is
Hmm.
um I've learned to sit with it now. I've learned to accept it.
Hmm.
But it wasn't comfortable for quite a while.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge you for playing along with me and going deeper with the
You're welcome.
invitation. And what I believe I'm hearing, what I'm seeing and what you're sharing is that when you get pushed to physical limits because you're tired and you run out of bandwidth or juice or whatever battery, then you get cranky. And my experience is like that sounds very normal to me. It sounds like you have some judgment around that that may be tied to some expectations about yourself.
Yes, I think I don't want to go deep into my childhood here, but yeah, I,
Mm,
I saw conflict in my childhood. And so, and it was a pattern that repeated itself at times in my adult life, which was the last thing I ever wanted.
hmm.
Um, and alcohol was definitely the fuel for that, right?
Hmm.
But I think I do, because of those experiences in childhood, I almost want this perfect life now, and I want everybody to have the best experience they can when they're with me, which
Hmm.
I know that bar's set too high, right? But the way I can control that is just to take myself out of the equation when I know that I can't achieve the
Yeah.
aims that I want to.
Yet, what I believe I see is, and I think is probably one of the morals to your story here, is that before comma one, you might have been more likely to just act and behave in the way that now you reflect on and control, right? Like
Yeah.
before, you just went into that person, that character, that persona, and acted on it. Today, you choose differently. You're aware of it, you notice it, and you're in charge of it enough to be able to say, well, I don't really like what I think this makes me believe about myself. But yet, I think the thing to acknowledge is that all of that is very conscious, right? Like you are
Mm.
aware, conscious, and present with yourself in a way that before comma one sounds like things were going in a different direction. So I think that's important to acknowledge.
Yeah, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
If you would like, I'll just very, very briefly, out of solidarity, and if this was a coaching session, I wouldn't say anything to make you feel better, but because we're brothers from other mothers and it's a podcast, I'd love to share something in case it makes you feel a little
Go
better.
for it.
First of all, I too had a moment where I had the uncomfortable realization. We could list for a long time, as all of our colleagues could, all of the things that we discovered about ourselves that are uncomfortable. But I discovered once I was sober, I didn't have problems any. I didn't not have problems anymore, but I was able to be with them and unpack them more and deal with the discomfort. I realized that while I was drinking, I was trying to be somebody who was remarkable. And when I was sober, I realized that I'm not really that remarkable after all.
Wow.
Now, that can go a lot of different ways. And where I took it was because, I can already hear the voices of the people who love me the most saying, of
Mm.
course, you're remarkable and everything. I'm like, that's not really the point. We're all remarkable, right? Is that I had an expectation that somehow I needed to be more remarkable than I am. So being normal and being unremarkable is human and it's totally fine, right? It was the belief that I needed to somehow be more remarkable. So I had to unpack that for myself. I had to face that truth. And it's like, oh, you're kind of
Yeah.
just an average dude. And, but that's 100% okay. And nobody has to be anything more than that for what
I
it's
get that.
worth.
Thank you for sharing.
Mm, mm. Let's go back to you, Vince. Okay, so we'll start to kind of wind things down. Question four is what has changed for you as a result of sitting on these two commas?
I'm running my own business.
Mm,
I mean, quite simply, that's one of two big changes. I wouldn't have had, I always would have had the courage to do it. I wouldn't have had the wherewithal to do it properly.
mm.
I'm
For
not
the
sure
benefit
I,
for the benefit of our learners, what's the distinction there? What's the distinction between the courage and the wherewithal?
so the courage is almost, shut my eyes, leap into it, let's go for it, right? Because
Hmm.
that, that's
Hold my
how
beer.
yeah, that's how I progressed through all of my careers. Like, um, yeah, I want that next big job. And then the next day wake up and go, oh my God, I just got that big job. But how do I do this? That was kind of the pattern of my progression through my career.
Uh-huh.
Um, but at each step, I always succeeded. So every time I just got more confident going, right, I'll take an even bigger leap this time because I haven't found the ceiling yet. Um, I think the difference is this time much more considered thought and research, much more reflection, but
Hmm.
from a deeper place and really analyzing all of the data and what's important rather than chasing shiny things. So I've made lots of mistakes in the 3 years I've been running my business, and some of them have cost me some money. But actually, the way I look at them now is, I love the Edison, the light bulb thing. I'm just running out of ways not to do it right. Okay, so um,
Hmm.
and so I'm not sure I'd have. I'm not sure I'd have. Well, I know I wouldn't have been that as effective for it if I was still consuming alcohol because I've made some really good decisions early in the morning.
Hmm.
Waking up with a clear head and bright, and you wake up and you just go suddenly bang, I know what I've got to do today. My instinct tells me what's right, and I know how I need to do this, and I think that wouldn't have happened quite so much. And the other big change is my relationship with my wife.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, we used to f fall out fairly regular. I don't mean daily. I mean it'd be
Hmm.
we'd rarely go a quarter without some kind of silence in the house for a day or two as we're both contemplating what we think the other one's done wrong. Um, or at least how to try and convince them that they need to understand what they've done wrong.
Hmm.
And I guess in my sobriety, I've just owned the shit I've done wrong, right? So, and like I said, I've been far more comfortable, and I wasn't meaning it in this context when I described it before, but I'm far more comfortable now. And I don't need to put my point of view across.
Yeah.
So I'm far more comfortable sitting in the other person's space and trying to unwind and unpack all of that. And what I've now found in my relationship is that it's probably 50-50, and that when that unpacking all happens, sometimes I get some new learning and sometimes my wife gets some new learning. But actually, we're
Hmm.
both more, and we don't fall out once a quarter now, far from it. If it's even once a year, that's too
Hmm.
frequent these days. But the relationship is just so much stronger. There's so much more respect in there than there ever was,
Yeah.
both ways.
Two things that you just said. One you directly said, and one that you kind of inferred that I want to test with you. One, I just love, and I'm underlining in my notes here, from a deeper place. Like everything else that you said really kind of comes out of that pocket
Mm,
there, more thoughtful, more intentional. You didn't use those words, but that's what I'm taking from this. And then this other thing, which I think is kind of like I want to underline it because, or write it in the margin maybe because these are my words, but that I think is such an important takeaway for people who are listening who might also be thinking about, quitting drinking and in their relationship with alcohol is speaking for myself, when we're drunk, when something goes wrong, there's always that kind of level of guilt and shame. Like, well, of course it's my fault because I was drinking. Of course it's my fault because I was drunk. Sometimes there's the like, oh crap, I know I did something bad. And then other times it's like, probably just because I was drinking in general, right? And
yeah,
and then sometimes what keeps us from even considering quitting drinking is we don't want to have to face all those things, right? Like in some communities they talk about making amends, but any of us can do a deep and personal inventory about anything at any time. And what you just described is once the alcohol's out of the mix, it's really not that hard to admit to the things that you did wrong, but also release them and let them go and take
yeah,
accountability for it. It's not as painful, right? And that when you take alcohol out of the mix, the likelihood that it's your fault starts to lower and equalize a lot more too, doesn't it? So
exactly that.
react to that. I'm just curious. So,
Yeah, no, exactly that. And it can't be thrown back at you that it's because of you and your drinking,
mhm.
right? That excuse is gone. And
Sadly, though, sometimes then it's like, well, fuck, I can't blame my drinking for that stupid thing that I
well,
did.
and you know what? And that's, I mean, you're right, but that's actually, I wouldn't swap that place for anything
Mm-mm.
because, uh, when you stopped being angry and, you just take a bit of space, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do. Um, you think actually, yeah, I deserve to own that. So I'm 100% with that. It's
Mm.
fundamentally, by the way, I should say, you've still got to have the right kind of personality to do this, right? If you're a narcissist, you're going to struggle with this anyway.
Ah, for sure.
But if you're prepared to do it, then you've removed, like you say, you've removed all those chemicals and neurological barriers that stop you thinking that way. So uh, you still get tough days. I don't
Hmm.
want anybody who thinks, oh, this is magic. Like I'll stop drinking and suddenly life's going to be beautiful and happy. It isn't, right? Sometimes, but it's what I tend to find now is it's life doesn't hit those bumps because of stuff I've done,
Hmm.
right?
Mm.
Life hits bumps now because of what life throws at me, and it's how I choose to handle them, which is
Man.
much calmer than I ever used to do.
That is, I mean, thank you for sharing that because like I even needed to hear that right now. So just thank you for sharing that because
Oh
that
well.
like really landed with me. I took in a deep breath as you said that. And yeah, it's just this ability to see and recognize and participate in things without attaching unnecessary meaning to things sometimes.
Mm.
Mm. Vince, question 5. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
Oh, joyous.
Mm.
And I wasn't planning that word. That's just after how we've been discussing for the last hour or so. I would say purpose is much stronger. Purpose feels
Mhm.
aligned to me now rather than purpose being aligned to what I think the expectations of me are. And to be honest, what I thought the expectations of me were probably very few people had anyway, right? They were just, it was like,
Mm,
it's a societal thing, I've got to lead, there was always the next step I had to try and achieve with things.
mm,
So I'd say I'm enjoying life much more frequently in the moment than I used to. Way more, to be honest. My wife and I now make a point of I've become a sponsor of the local theatre. We go to the theatre at least once a month. I've probably went to the theatre more times last year than I did in all of my life when I was drinking.
mm-hmm,
Um, because suddenly I'm appreciating what the actors are doing. I'm just leaning so much more into everything and just absorbing everything about what goes into the performance and the story of the performance, whereas it just would have been quite superficial for me when I was drinking.
mm,
But we're making a point of let's create those moments. We go to more concerts now than we ever did before, which is ironic because I've always loved music, but we just make it a priority to make sure we can be there and enjoy what we want to.
mm,
I've still got ambition for my business. I've still got the same drive in my career to achieve my ultimate goal, which is to one day be able to look back and go, I ran a really successful business that was mine. It's doing
mm-hmm,
really well at the moment. I'm really happy with it. I've got some great clients, lots of really good stories around, but for me, it still needs to progress to other levels and new chapters in that. And I think that's something for myself. I just want to really prove, having done that in other people's businesses for other shareholders, I really want to prove that I can do that for myself.
mm,
But it also doesn't feel like at any cost now, which is what it maybe did do earlier in my career. It's got a balance with the other things in my life. So I'm loving my relationship with my wife. Uh, I'm loving my relationship with my kids. I've mended a lot there that was a bit broken.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm enjoying being the master of my own destiny every day when I wake up.
That right there. I want to reflect something back to you, and that throughout the podcast, more so the second half of the podcast, and then your answer to question five, you use the word more a lot. And you use it for a whole bunch of specific things. And what I really heard between the lines is more potential and more possibility.
Yeah,
Mm,
good spot. Definitely that.
wonderful. You let's end the interview part of the conversation right there. We can continue, and fortunately, because you and I know each other, we can continue, and we probably will continue. But let's wrap up your episode today. So, last two parts of the episode, and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being willing to go deeper. Um, where can people find you? For people who want to connect with you, maybe hear more about your story, reach out, follow you on socials and so forth. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Where can people find you?
Wonderful. Well, in the sobriety coaching I now do, as we're both qualified, my brand is the Exec Sobriety Coach. Um, I've got a TikTok on that, Instagram, and a web page, which is .uk, the web page on that. And also my leadership training business is Melia S. So if you search either of those two things, that's where you'll find me.
Okay, nice. Okay, last piece is something we do in every episode, and that is a section I like to call acknowledgments because you being here, sharing your story is all about what this podcast is about, which is like
Mm.
lifting people's stories up, letting us learn and hear and be inspired by everyday people in our communities and around us. And your story wouldn't be complete if I didn't give you the opportunity to lift up others, acknowledge others. So that can be causes, organizations, it can be other creators, it can be people in your, immediate sphere, your life that are important to you. So it's your opportunity to boost them, give them a lift up and lift their voices up. Who would you like to
Sure.
acknowledge today?
The first person I'm going to say is someone's name you haven't heard,
Mm,
who's come to mind through while I've been doing this. So I want to give an acknowledgement to a wonderful coach called Jo Houchin, who works in the UK. She does some work with me now. I've known her for probably 15 years. She has been quite instrumental in helping me gain the focus in my career to be able to now start to build the business I'm doing. There were a couple of key moments when I had wobbles, and she definitely got me on the straight and narrow. And I may not have progressed to where I was if
mm,
if I hadn't had that session or two with her. So definitely a shout out to Joe, wonderful human being. I want to give a shout out to Janie Lee Grace, which I know you know Janie very well, and some
Hmm.
of your listeners do as well.
She's even
Um,
been on the podcast.
there you go.
Yeah.
And you know what? A really important part of what Janie's achieved for me in the process of, apart from just how wonderful she is and the extra education she's given me around what sobriety actually means. The very fact I wanted to lean into that and become a coach is I know it was almost not that I felt I really needed it at the time, but it was almost that final 1% to get me to 100 of I will never drink again because
Mm.
I have a newfound purpose behind my sobriety, not just my own personal selfishness of my sobriety. So that's amazing. I want to give a nod to another big name in the sobriety world as well, Andy Ramage. So in those days when I was battling the moderation drinking, I leapt onto 1 year no beer at one point. And my motive at that point was as simple as I've spent a month's worth of alcohol consumption by joining this, therefore I can't drink for the next month. That was literally my only initiative at the first time.
Nice.
But again, Andy's got a really um, warm and connecting and engaging style about him, and he's just got a real nice integrity and transparency about what living a good life for yourself is about.
Mm.
Uh, so I found him very inspirational. And the last nod has got to go to my wife, Amanda Hannant.
Mm.
I've seen her achieve some amazing things in her career since we've been together. Um, and there were one or two times in the early days where she just could have walked away. And
Mm.
maybe not specifically just from me, but the whole situation was very difficult. And I was a major component in it not being any easier. And,
Mm.
she could have decided that was all too much. But actually, the journey we've now gone on and the level of support she's given me for what I now want to achieve without ever really being judgmental to me has been amazing. So she definitely deserves the final and probably biggest nod from me.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure to include all of these references in the show notes and any links
Thank
that
you.
you've shared with these folks, and encourage everyone who's listening to certainly check out Vince and also go explore some of these folks that he's acknowledged because they're an important and integral part of the story that he's just shared with us. So, Vince, thank you again, and obviously you and I will be connecting, but I want to wish you a very happy weekend ahead.
Thank you for making it a pleasurable experience. Really enjoyed it, Paul. Thanks.
My pleasure. What an honor it is for me to hear and share these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way. Think about what you learned from this conversation. I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling or reflection because surprises can reveal themselves to you when you write your thoughts down. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform and all social media at Off the Comma. Feel free to interact and comment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.